This is
Look
awesome.
very
Thank you
pretty.
so much.
You're very
Thank
welcome.
you. Maybe I can see how I can turn the volume up.
It's nice to see you again.
Thank you. It's nice to see you too. It's been years, hasn't it?
It has. It has.
How are you? How
I'm
are
I'm
things?
good. I'm good. I had a health challenge for a bit. I had a cancer was detected between my sinuses and my brain, and they said it couldn't be couldn't be surgically removed. So they said we'll try with chemo, but there's no promises. And thank goodness it worked. But the downside, right after I was done with all the chemo, and they said the cancer was gone, so that was good. Unfortunately, the side effects of the chemo ended up weakening my spine, and I got a broken back. I got 5 fractured vertebrae. So I've spent the last year learning how to walk again.
So sorry about it, but I'm really happy that you overcame this challenge, and I'm really sorry to hear about it. I know I can only imagine. It's really tough. I've had my fair share of health scares. I don't know if you know it, but I almost died. Also with the sinuses issue.
Okay,
So I know how difficult it can be, but thank goodness we're still here and we're having this conversation. And
exactly.
at the end of such a challenge, I feel like I have more wisdom and I appreciate life even more. So
Absolutely.
it's like I've heard this saying once, a blessing wrapped in sandpaper.
Wow, that's a colorful expression. Very nice.
It hurts. It hurts while you're in it, but afterwards you find the blessing wrapped in sandpaper. So
Absolutely. I have, over the course of my life, I've had several friends um, leave early, shall we say, who, passed away when they were much younger. So I had friends who passed away in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s, their 50s. So here I am, I'm in my 70th year, and I figure that I'm very fortunate that I still have my wits about me and that I can still contribute and try to do some good with my writing colleagues and I still am very active in politics and I write political cartoons. My poetry has a political aspect to it, and I believe that when we have a chance to work together across distances, across the planet, that is good for civilization.
that's true. And I'm actually so grateful that you agreed to have this conversation. I think it will be a great conversation, a really meaningful conversation. And I'm really looking forward to hearing your answers. So, my first question is related to you as a writer. So we've never met in person. I've never been to America. I would really like to one day.
Maybe one
Um,
day.
if
You're
I'm
always
coming.
welcome. You're always welcome here.
Thank you. Well, for sure, if I am ever gonna come to America, I'm gonna contact you. I'm gonna be like, Rick, I'm coming.
Good, and you will be welcomed here with open arms.
Yeah, but we somehow found each other on the World Wide Web, and we connected due to our shared passion for writing. I really don't remember how it happened, but it happened, and we somehow started this conversation, and we're
Mercia,
here later.
Mercia Danduta, I think, introduced us first.
That's true. So poets with the poets who introduce poets to each other. Yeah. And well, as an introduction, could you please tell us a few words about you as a writer, as a poet?
Well, okay. Um, I knew from when I was just a small child that I wanted to be a writer, that I was a storyteller. Believe it or not, when I was 8 years old, I got a tape recorder and I would walk around and interview people because I had a sense that everyone had a story, that everyone had learned something, had experienced something that we could all learn from. Later, in my studies, I was very much a student of history, of anthropology, of culture, and ultimately a student of religion. I've read very widely in religion, and many of the ancients teach that you should regard everyone you meet as your teacher. And I always thought there was a great amount of wisdom there. So I started writing when I was a little kid. When I was in just elementary school, let's say from 5 years old until 10 years old, I spent a lot of time in libraries. I love libraries. And I had a feeling that one day some of my writing might be significant enough to find a place in a library. So I was always determined to write with two goals in mind all the time. And I knew this from when I was a kid. I wanted to write to encourage people to think about the problems of the world, how to make it better, and at the same time, while I was hoping to get people to think, I encapsulated as think and laugh, because I think that laughter is such an important part of human life. There's too much silliness, there's too much foolishness, and if we only think sad about it, then we're going to spend a lot of time being sad. But if we can laugh at human weakness, if we can laugh at human foibles, if we can laugh at human stupidity, because that's what it is sometimes. I have another expression where I say sometimes people are very slow learners. You know, if you're smart, if you think, then you can learn the lesson when it's an easy problem to solve. But if you're not paying attention or you're ignoring a problem, it can get very, very bad very, very quick, and then it's a real problem to solve. So I try to write so that people think and laugh, and I try to always write with a little sense of humor, even though I write about a lot of very serious topics.
I know exactly what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. Well, I decided to invite you for this interview when I saw the new anthology, Silence is Consent. And when I saw the title, I was like, oh my goodness. I love the title. I haven't read it yet. I haven't bought it yet, but for sure I would like to get my own copy. You know what I mean? I love the title. I find it so true. And as a writer, I've always felt it that, silence really is consent when we witness social injustice, when we witness grave issues such as human rights violations. As a writer, I feel I am obliged to speak up. Otherwise, I cannot leave the planet with a clean karma. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. Exactly what you mean. You know, and I know that a lot of people's reaction to a problem is to hide their eyes or to be busy and forget about it, try to do things that amuse them. But ultimately, problems have to be faced. And I think the other responsibility that writers have, and this to me is very important, there's an old expression, the unexamined life is not worth living. And what that means to me is you have to pay attention. You have to speak up. And if you're a thinking person, you're a writer. Writers are often thinking people. And if we see a problem and we have analyzed it and have come up with maybe not the perfect solution, but some path toward a solution, we owe it to our civilization to try to contribute, even if we're wrong, but we should address the problem. Ignoring a problem is no solution. And obviously, there's plenty of foolishness around. Plenty of foolishness around.
It's true. It's true. Well, how did your voice find its way into this book, into this anthology?
Well, let me explain, and I'll try to say this very discreetly, very quickly. I've been writing about social issues since I was a very young man. When I was in my teens, America was committing a horrible war in Vietnam. Most of the young men of my age were being called up. And before I got to that, before it was my turn to be called up, I wrote about the racism of it. I wrote about the terrible waste of human life. I wrote about why do some people always want to kill others to solve a problem? And the worst lie of the whole lot, and there's just 2 tons of lies, was that we were there to help. We weren't there to help. We were there to help business. We were there to help the petroleum industry and the arms industry and the warrior industry. We weren't there to help the Vietnamese. We were killing them by the thousands. And worse, poisoning their land. So I started writing about that stuff way back then. And I have opposed every war we've had, and I've been too busy doing that. And when I heard that there was a book being compiled of many different writers who had thoughts they wanted to share about the current leadership in America, or the current president anyway, because he's not a leader of any kind, not good, I was invited to participate. So I contributed a handful of poems, thinking that maybe one or possibly two might be included. But they chose several of my poems and some of my cartoons too. So I was very honored. The gentleman that put together the collection, Chris Bogart, a very fine man. He is very involved in trying to contribute constructively. And I know that of the people that notice problems, more than half just want to complain. They're happy simply complaining. That's enough. But some of us, people like you and me and many others, thank goodness, we try to help. We try to do something to improve the situation, if only to shine a light on it, because that's important. So I've got my copy here of, let's see if I can get it. Yeah, well, it was there a second ago. Let's see. Silence is consent. There it is. And
so true. So
yeah.
true, so true. Such a good title.
Well, there's a story about how people wonder how did tyrants like Hitler or Stalin or Pol Pot, or pick one or another. How does that happen? How does that occur? How do people make that kind of terrible mistake? And Trump. So some of us thought about that, and we wrote about it. And the idea here is to stimulate thinking, to help people come up with plans to try to deal with it, to try to improve the situation. Now, we're not millionaires. Sometimes some of us are barely hundredaires. but we know that with our brains and with our heart and by working together with other good people, we can make it better. A little bit at a time. So that's what this book is about. And I've had the chance to talk to Chris many times. And it's a book that I can really recommend because it's got so much good thinking in it. And
I really wanted to be honest. I saw so many contributors, so many authors, and I don't know many of the names, but I'm so curious, so curious. It would have been lovely to have read it before having this interview. I would have loved to. Time was short. I'm happy. I'm happy I'm here. I'm honest about it. I haven't read it yet, but I really want to.
well,
So
what
what's
I can do for you is I can read a couple poems from it, and I'll read mine and maybe one others, so that you have a sense of it and your audience can understand a little bit of what we were doing.
that's
Hold
awesome.
on 1 second here, and I'll find a couple of these poems that I think you'll find uh, reach to that place. Okay, let's see here. we're close. If you want to ask me another question while I'm looking, I can do that.
Well, the next question is related to the message of your poems. What is the message of your poems in Silence is Consent? And I think there is no other better way to answer this question than to actually read a poem, you know?
Okay. Okay. One of the cartoons. Let me describe a cartoon that was included because I do a lot of political cartoons. I was struck as a young child how a cartoon with so few lines and so few words can communicate so much. And I've always been impressed. I used to have a collection of old books from the late 1800s, early 1900s that had these wonderful, powerful cartoons about history, about leaders, about decisions, and that sort of thing. And it was just so amazing to me that they could do this. So I started doing my anti-war cartoons in way back in the 1960s. So I've done cartoons in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, in the 2000s, and I still do them today. So here's a poem, and this is about a dictator. Well, it's about Trump, but it speaks to any dictator, and we know too many. So this is called Only One Acceptable Outcome. With only one acceptable outcome, guess what? We're not surprised, but precisely understood because we're not dumb. They think they won the prize of the victory over the myriad of freedoms that they despise. We're in this game for the long pull. We're not here just to support one vainglorious fool who might traipse across the Atlantic to accept international accolades so rich and seemingly dynamic, although stilted, formal, and quite archaic. But with robes of state so ill-fitting, he'll find compensation not so fulsome or befitting. A presumptive allied leader with a need for headstrong noise and some theater, but he'll be blustering on the international stage. He'll seem so petty and so out of place. Not the sort of global stagecraft so much more befitting a dunce, not a sage, who's so typically smug or in a simple pointless rage. There's no celebration or certainty at such mock militant jerkery. The monumental ego and cartoon military stratego on parade, so displayed by those he's nominated for high office, the kind of villainous offal that he's tossed us. Strictly there because they're weak and will never bring fealty to the Constitution or any fragmentary illusion of problem solving to our great and noble institution. But, I wanted to address not just particular political foolishness, but I wanted to address humanity more generally. So I shared this poem. It's called A Behaviorist Perspective, The Causes of Racism. Because there's too much racism still. And, you would think that since the same kind of humans have been made for several thousands of years, that we've gotten used to the idea that sometimes humans are brown or black or yellow or red or pink or tan or pale. This is what humans are. They're all those things. And while this was written about a particular crime and about a particular failure to understand common humanity, I think it speaks to the larger problem. A behaviorist perspective. The causes of racism. The troop or group, the clan's glad hand, the sign of 9, the grip in the dark, the posted mark informs the stable state of norms. Remembering the frames of membrane games, brain disguises, shade your eyes in apple pies, it sizes the territory, the turf. Well, the good should. Our side of town, our group is right. in the sight of good God's smile. Even sunlight reviles your kind outside the pure to lure with your kind's lazy, stupid stunts. A sparrow of a different hue could be torn and clove in two by a few of another blue hunt. The strength, bounding, bonding, unicellular life in multicellular strife, responding, besiding, it ties the atoms so tight, minute, molecular might, and chooses in precise measure who you'll sleep with tonight. Beehives survive by the tribe's trance. The queen's romance excludes the rude outsider, protects the provider, determines the rider of the queen's desire. Embolden invaders, reduce the chance for the tribe to advance. Social groups and baboon shoots, baboon troops and fishy schools, they know who the foe is, when to go, who's the friend, where's the end. The rules used, training fools by gene and team's wish, that's culture's dish, keeps the Portuguese man of war banging on the door. It explains to the colony who to hang on to and why. Cultural clash, like red ants and black as a reason to attack, is a common step to keep hep to good guys and bad. But isn't it sad how often the supportive social ties, the tools of molecular rules, can conceal the lack and leak of the social contract to the greater stack? The organs of your hand would be foolish to war or inflict harm on the arm. Could the leg force the knee to submit or flee? Could the brow to the forehead say, drop dead, begone, amscray, and then in confusion sway against the neighbor's array? As this is, to make a fist to relate the cultural trait, a boundary in this or any country, take Humpty Dumpty. He's really something to relate to the ground with a loud cracking sound. Unicellular or multicellular, in clothing and in motion, you're expressing the notion of your tribe. It doesn't hide, it wouldn't try. But membranes even say, if you lean over easy this way, together is stronger, lives happier longer. Cultural rifts needn't cause tiffs, or express fists in pain what it is when they mean the support of us. They needn't bleed trust, or force us to muss the membrane's edgy thrust. But if you say it must, symbiosis is being, osmosis its meaning. Surely you know this. There's no relief in grief. Let tribal libel cease. Extend the grace of space. The use of social bonding to unite is great, but even edges meet and act to attract the surging urge to merge.
So beautiful. So beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Rich. Thank you. Very well
Like I
said.
said, it was about one particular incident, but it seemed to me that it speaks to the fact that it's normal for us to recognize tribes. That there's an in-group and an out-group. That's normal. It's mammal, and it's even beyond mammals. Insects, fish, they know their groups. That's true. But it doesn't mean that troops have to be at war. That different groups can work together. And that's what I was hoping to point out.
I feel like war has terrible consequences, and I've written 12 poems about peace. I numbered them from 0 to 11, so it's like peace 0 to peace 11, and I will always be a promoter of peace, for sure. War has terrible consequences, terrible karmic consequences. It's not a solution in any way, and I feel it really is time for humanity to evolve and find better ways to solve conflict, because war is definitely not a solution. It scars generations.
Yeah.
Like,
And so many of the innocent die.
Yeah,
If it
unfortunately.
was just the people that wanted war, if they were the only ones being killed, maybe you could make an argument for it. But the innocent people die, the
Yeah.
children, the women, the
And
kids.
if they survive, they might lose everything. So it's a really sad topic for me. And well, I really pray daily for world peace. And I really hope that humanity will find better ways to address issues. Well, my next question is also related to politics. I will bring a little bit of context. I don't know if you knew about it, but I was born and raised in Romania, and ever since I can remember, since early childhood, I loved books and I dreamed of writing my own books. So I also knew I was a writer, just like you, since I was a child. And growing up, it was very difficult for me to discover the history of my people. I'm pretty sure you've read 1984.
Oh yes, oh yes.
So 1984, though fiction, it really describes it's very well the circumstances and inner struggles of the people living during those times. And just to give you like a little bit of personal background to it, I was driving. My father was driving to Bucharest when I was quite young, in my 20s, and I had this book with me, and sometimes I shared some quotes from it with my father. So my father lived during those times. I was born 3 years after the revolution. That's how we speak, before the revolution and after the revolution. And I asked my father, "Well, Dad, how was it when you were young?" And my father replied, "Well, kind of like in your book." So, um, yeah, 1984. And in my early adolescence, I somehow managed to discover some archives. Don't ask me how I did it. I don't remember, but I did it. And I discovered terrible stories about the systematic eradication of intellectuals.
Yeah, yeah.
And I got blocked. Seriously, I couldn't write in Romanian anymore. It was just like block, 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 block. And as a writer, we have to write.
That's
As
right.
writers, we have to write. So I started writing in English, and I created this heteronym, Alma Lutum. It was the only way I felt safe enough to write. Um, and it's only now, when I'm 33 years old, and it's also due to some situations where silence is consent, that I started writing in Romanian, but really writing from my heart, really writing. Yes, I'm right. It's only now at 33 years old. And I still feel fear sometimes.
Sure.
I don't publish everything I write. I write it, but I don't publish everything I write. And sometimes I'm afraid. I feel fear, but I do it anyway, in spite of my fear, because silence is consent, right? So the question is, for you, what would you say? How do you find the courage to tell the truth when necessary?
Well, it's never easy. And when you speak out against the popular wisdom, you realize that you're taking a chance. And you weigh in your own mind and heart, is telling the truth worth it? Or is silence an adequate answer? And I can tell you that for me, I have many, many times decided that I could not be silent. When I was drafted, when I was selected to go and kill people in Vietnam, I had a dear friend say to me, Rick, you're an artist, you're a writer. Let me give you money. Go to Canada, hide out. Your 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 writing is so beautiful. You're thoughtful. Your mind shouldn't do that. And as a poet, the idea of being a romantic escapee from tyranny has its allure. But I meditated on it. I thought about it long and hard, and I decided that I would take a course that I chose to go ahead and enter the army, but with the goal of telling the truth.
Okay.
And I decided that I was going to speak truth to power. I was going to tell them that war was evil, that they were bringing very bad karma on themselves, and that this war was racial, that this war was about money, had nothing to do with freeing the people in Vietnam, and that I would refuse to kill people, even though it's my country. I balanced it out this way. I said, look, as a citizen, I owe you my body. Okay? I get that. You require me to give my body. Okay, you can have my body. You do not get my mind. You do not get my behavior. You do not get my support. And I think you know a
Free
little bit
sovereign
about
being.
you know you know a little about meditation, right? So the
Yes.
very first day that I was there, now they went to great lengths to terrorize these young men so that they would, this is good psychological warfare theory. If they scare them, then they turn to the army for support, for safety, right? So they're trying to terrorize these young men, and they were literally nervous wrecks. So what I did for my own safety and sanity was I sat down and started to chant Om. When I opened my eyes 15 minutes later, I had a group of people sitting around me watching me, and some of them had joined in. By the end of that first night, 30 people were joining me to chant Om because they tried it and it calmed them down. And within 4 days, the entire group of 60 people in our barracks sat down with me and chanted Om with me
That's so
to calm
awesome.
themselves down. Now, I got called in to the military police, and they said, "We want to know what you're up to. We think," and they actually said these words to me. They said, "You are a danger to the army."
Oh my goodness.
Now,
Well, how did you make it out alive?
well, that had to be karma because the logic, there was no logic in my position, none. And they said, "You can have an attorney. You don't have to talk to us, but we would like to ask you questions." So I said, "Ask. I'm a teacher. I will tell you whatever you need to know." So they asked me all these questions, and I'm talking about karma, I'm talking about, auras, and I'm, explaining them the energy, and what, because they do chanting, but they do terrible chanting. They do murder chants. They do rape chants. This is what, to program these young men to do what they want them to do, to kill people, to make killing acceptable. So I'm telling them this truth, right? And they're looking at me like I'm absolutely crazy, right? And they said, "Are you on drugs?" I said, "Yes. Yes, I'm on oxygen and nitrogen. It's amazing." They go, "Where do you get oxygen and nitrogen?" I go, "Oh, it's everywhere. Anybody can get it." And obviously they didn't know any chemistry at all. And and they said, "We're going to take you to see a military psychologist because we think you're crazy and we think you're a danger to the army." And I'm thinking, me? I'm a danger to the army.
Oh my goodness.
So, so on the way to the psychiatrist, because they want to evaluate me, they think I'm dangerous, right? So I'm chanting Om in the car on the way. This guy's driving me, and he's sitting over on the side of his chair so that whatever I'm doing doesn't hit him or just doesn't infect him. So while I'm meditating, I got a clear picture in my head because I get pictures in my head that it would work out, that somehow, some way, it would work out. Now, there's different kinds of divination. There's cards and there's astrology and there's a Chinese method called I Ching, right? Okay.
Yes.
Well, I was studying I Ching at that point in time. So in my journals, I had all 64, hexagrams and I knew what they meant. I walk into the psychiatric office. When the psychiatrist comes in, he's got this folder with all these pages of my testimony. And he's flipping through it. And I notice on his desk is a mug, a coffee mug. You know what was on that mug? A hexagram of I Ching, of sun over sun, that the sun from above will shine on the earth and everything is going to work out. You'll cross the great stream. The tiger will not find its tooth. The spear will not find its point. Everything's going to be okay. You're going to cross the great stream. So as he's flipping through this, he looks at me and he says, Richard, I think you have better things to do than kill people. And I said, sir, I think you're absolutely right. He said, now here's the problem. Unless I say you're insane, unless I say you are unfit mentally to kill people, they're going to insist on keeping you in the officer's headquarters, which means they're going to kill you.
Oh my goodness.
The only option I have is I have to put you in a mental hospital. He said, but I think after about 2 weeks, I can have you released from the army as mentally unfit to kill people, and you'll get an honorable medical discharge. And I pointed out the window at the army base, soldiers marching up and down, and the tanks and the guns and all that. And I said, sir, if that's sanity, book my room.
What a story, Rick.
So I spent 2 weeks in a psychiatric hospital because I was unfit to kill and murder.
I'm also definitely unfit, for sure. That's why we're here talking, right? What a story. Thank you so much for sharing it with me. I feel really honored and whew.
So that took a considerable amount of faith and trust in the goodness of the universe.
Yeah.
And
But you were there and you lit up the place, right? You lit up the place. You were there, you chanted, you delivered the message, and you got out safe, and I'm really happy about it because well, I I don't even know what else to say.
well, go ahead, go back to your questions.
Okay, well, yes, let's go to the next question I've prepared, and this one is related to our responsibility. I feel that as artists, we have a great responsibility to society and humanity, and that our art is truly powerful. What can you tell us about this topic? I
I
know we've
think
touched it a little bit, but maybe we can go deeper.
it's a very good question. And you know, there are different reasons why people are artists. Hopefully, the best reasons are because they want to share something that's in their heart. They're struck by the beauty and sometimes by the horror of the world, and they want to share their particular personal experience of it. Now, I think because I believe in service to my fellow humanity, I believe that those of us who pay attention to the world, those of us who are observers, those of us who are artists in this world, we have this gift to share. We have this gift because the universe has designed you and has designed me to take our snapshots, to have our experiences, and then pass them on so that someone can learn. When we look at ancient literature, look at the oldest stories that we can find, right? Gods and goddesses and fables and epic tales. I think of, for example, and there's many, but I think of the Iliad and the Odyssey, the tales of the battles of the Greeks and the Trojans, or the battles of the Greeks and the Persians, or the great adventures of Marco Polo, or Lao Tzu, or Confucius, or the Buddha, or the Native American stories, or European stories. These stories illustrate what it was like to be in that moment. What dilemmas did they face? What challenges? What did they learn from that challenge? What did they learn? And my mind turns to the Trojan horse because the gentleman who's the president, and I use the term gentleman loosely in this case, he was just given a Trojan horse. He was given a jet plane. But the important thing is that poets especially, are the oldest stories we know. Those are the most ancient stories. So when people say to me, poetry, no, it's unimportant, it's inconsequential, I start telling them all the reasons why it's so vital, it's so powerful, and lives longer than monuments.
It
Okay?
is. Actually, my journey with poetry was quite unexpected. Since I was a child, I've always wanted to write a fantasy book for children, and I've only started working on it now. It's my fourth, and my first published book was poetry, and I never would have thought about it, never. But that's how it came. It came, and I was surprised myself. I was like, "Am I a poet? My first book is poetry? How come?" But there is such power in poetry. There is such magic in poetry. When you fall in love with it, you cannot unfall in love with
Yeah,
poetry. Definitely.
absolutely. I I have I grew up in a culture that regarded poetry as the poor stepsister of real writing. And my response to that sort of thinking is this. Okay, do do songs have poetry? Yes. When you're at a sports game, do they use poetry in their chants? Yes. When they want to sell you something in a commercial, is there poetry there? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so if they do this on the battlefield and they do this in commercials and they do this in the songs and they do this at the sports things, tell me again about how poetry is irrelevant and completely pointless. Tell me about it. Tell me how it's worthless. Because I will say the oldest stories humanity has are from the poets of the past.
That's true.
And are they always translated well? No, God, no. Oh,
Oh,
no.
it's the most difficult to translate poetry for sure. I've translated before writing. I translated. I speak several languages, and poetry is always the most difficult to translate. And I feel that there are never perfect translations of poetry. It's impossible to translate poetry
Well,
from
well,
one language to another.
let me get you off the hook, right? Let me relieve you of that burden because let me tell you something. In my opinion, Any poem, the most straightforward, concrete poem, can be interpreted 100 ways. What
Yeah,
line, what metaphor can't be 100 different things?
but
And
there's always something lost in translation, you know? That's the
of
thing.
course, and when you strive to try to carry a poem across that barrier of language, what a noble task. What a noble task. You are to be thanked for trying such juggling of bubbles, you know? Because to take the metaphors of one language and even understand what all they might mean in that same language is one thing, but then to try to transfer that into another language, oh my gosh, that should be regarded with great honor that you even tried to undertake that.
I really love it. It's like the moment when I can speak fluently another language and I can actually create a bridge between cultures. It's like, oh my goodness, I love it so, so much. It doesn't compare to anything. So I think this is a great segue to the next question, which is related to your other books. If you could tell us a bit about why did you decide to write and publish them?
Well, I let me start by saying when I was young and I knew I had to be a writer, I knew I didn't have a choice. I had to write. I did I did what I think many young people do who are thinking about writing. They said, "Well, are there how to write books? Are there how to be a successful author books? Oh God, there's tons and tons of them." And they all sort of boil down to the same suggestion. Number one, pick a popular topic. Okay? Pick a topic that people buy books. Like they buy books about crime, they buy books about sports, they buy books about fashion, they buy books about the macabre, they buy books about horrendous crimes. And I thought, I don't want to write any of that. I just don't. And I thought, well, then what kind of writer are you? And I knew that I was the kind of writer who wanted to help you think and laugh. And if I could do that, if I could give you something to think about, maybe in a way you hadn't thought about it before, and help you laugh about the silly humans and the brave humans and the caring humans and the careless humans and the silly humans, a laugh. That's my gold. That's if I get you to laugh, if I get you to smile, that's worth 100,000 million zillion dollars to me.
Well, you've
And
definitely succeeded in making me smile a lot, making me smile a lot tonight. So thank you so much. Thank you.
my
Thank you.
honor, dear, my honor. Okay, so
Likewise.
this last book, knowing all that, I have from time to time, well, let's put it this way, in my wild 20s, right? During, when we're all crazy a little bit when we're in our 20s, I used to make because I didn't want literature to be up here. Literature to me is not about busts of great poets of the past. My idea of poetry is sharing a thought, sharing a laugh, sharing an insight, describing some silly politician who's just trying to lie their face off. So I used to make a virtue of writing my poetry on any scrap of paper around. I'd grab a shopping bag, I'd grab a pizza box, a wrapper from an ad or a sock or what. After a while, I thought, going through a box of random pieces of paper is a little silly. So I went to notebooks. So I wrote notebook. I literally have 30 years of notebooks. Okay. And with drawings and pictures and sketches and this and that and poetry and
I have to
prose.
come visit you.
So at a certain point, I said to myself, Balzac, Victor Hugo, the great writers who I respect, they self-published. They found a way of getting their work in print, and eventually they were picked up by a publisher and paid to do this. And I thought, I'm getting to be 50 years old. Maybe I should self-publish myself. Because every time I reach out, I had probably 20 different articles published, right? I got paid for. But my first three, this is so hilarious. I was invited to submit an article to a scientific magazine, so I submitted it. They said, "This is great. Oh, we love this. This is witty. It's fun. And you explain things well. We'll take it." And I got paid. But you know what happened? The magazine went out of business before they printed my story. That happened 3 times in a row. They took my article. They loved my article. They paid me for the article. And then they went out of business 3 times. So I thought, I've got to find a more stable, serious publisher that will take my stuff. And there was a gentleman who had a literary magazine called The Exquisite Corpse, Andrei Codrescu, an Eastern European writer who edited and published a magazine of literature. And I'd heard him on the radio. So I wrote him and I said, I think this idea of yours, this magazine, is very interesting. You're a very intelligent fellow. I'd like to submit my writing. He said, "Yeah, sure, go ahead." So I did. I submitted several poems. He writes me back. "These are very good. They're very intelligent, very well written. Your language use is great. Your metaphors are interesting. This is fantastic stuff." And I said, trying to bait my hook a little more, I said, "Look, I just appeared at a really big literary festival called the Book Fair, Miami Book Fair. And I said, if you're interested, I can put you in touch with these people. They had me perform poetry. I'm sure they'd love to have you." He said, "Oh, that's great." So he got in touch with them and they accepted him and they invited him down. He said, "Listen, when I come to Miami, we'll meet." I said, "Okay, great." So when we meet, I feel so honored that this very intelligent, erudite publisher, philosopher, is going to meet with me and talk about my stuff, and he's already said he likes it. So we sit down for coffee, and I said, "So, Andre, I sent you 5 pieces, and you said they're funny, they're intelligent. Which one are you going to take?" He said, "Well, Richard, let me explain something to you. I don't know if you know this, but most publishers, they just really want to be famous. We really want to be famous." And I go, "Okay, thanks for the information. I'm glad to know." And he said, "But see, let me explain this." He said, "There's an actress who's the daughter of Ernest Hemingway, Margot Hemingway. Maybe you've heard of her." I said, "Of course." He said, "I'm going to publish 4 of her stories." I said, "Okay, she must be a good writer." He said, "She can't write her way out of a paper bag." I said, "Okay, there's something I don't get." He said, "It's because she's famous. So when you're famous, you let me know, and I'll publish your stuff." And I said, "Well, that's interesting." I said, "In your whole magazine, there's no room for like one of my pieces?" And he goes, "Oh, they're really good. Keep writing. These are great." And I go, "But there's no room for even one?" He goes, No, look, when you get famous, man, you let me know." And that was the last time I took publishing seriously. So
I get what you mean. That's also why I created my website, so that I can publish whatever I want.
yeah, well, and then let me tell you this. This is another funny story. I back in the 70s and 80s in Miami, there were poetry contests, poetry competitions. And in the art district of Miami, it's called Coconut Grove, they would hold these gatherings and poets competed. Now, I personally think that's repulsive. Compete? Look, you have your voice, you speak your truth, I have my voice, I speak my truth. Let's listen. Let's not judge each other. What's the point of that? Maybe, okay, maybe you could say like the delivery was good because some people read like this and then others people read, with some spirit. That I can get. But poetry competition? Well, long story short, I ended up winning 4 in a row. Okay.
Right.
Okay. I'm not impressed. But this guy walks up to me and he says, Richard, listen, I really like your writing. It's very funny, it's very witty. I'm a producer at the local radio station. Would you want to do a radio show? And I said, yeah, absolutely. What I'd like to do is a science fiction comedy called Martian Ambassador and the Captured Chorus, and it'll be a sci-fi comedy. And I hadn't thought of that. It just came out of my mouth. I was as surprised as he was because he thought he's going to get a poet to do a poetry show. But instead, I start talking about science fiction comedy. So he said, yes, okay. So I ended up writing a comedy show, a science fiction comedy show. And from that, my politics were too progressive for the station manager. He didn't like my politics. So one day I annoyed him enough that he fired me. Yeah, no more, no more. I said, okay, no problem. I didn't really mind because to me, I wasn't desperate to be famous. I wasn't desperate to be a radio writer. I enjoyed writing. I enjoyed the fact that the radio helps me get my work out, but I didn't really think too much of it. Well, the funny thing was he hired a different comedy group to do their show in place of mine. These guys had been listeners to my show. They liked my show. In fact, they thought I was very funny. So the first time they came to the studio to do their first show, they hired me to come and write for their show. So when the station manager is welcoming them into the studio, and he sees me, what are you doing here? You're fired. You're not here. I said, no, they hired me. I'm going to write for them.
I'm sure you have so many stories you could share with me.
Yes,
I'm sure
a
I'm
few.
sure stories. Well, I'm curious about your creative process, as I know it's deeply personal and it's unique to every artist. How would you describe your creative process?
Um, I have two approaches. Sometimes I use one, sometimes I use the other. The first one, and the most important one, is inspiration. I'll hear a line, I'll hear a phrase, or maybe sometimes coming from my head, and I'll think, "Oh, that's an interesting idea." For example, one morning I awoke and I heard the phrase in my head, avuncular aphid. Now, aphids are little creatures that climb around on plants, right, and suck life out of plants. I I knew that avuncular meant kind of friendly and kind of helpful and kind of parenty, but I didn't know exactly what it meant. But I thought avuncular aphids, yeah, I like that, yeah. So I started researching aphids because the next thing I typically do, if I'm going to write about something that struck me interesting, I do my research. So I researched about aphids. I learned about life cycles. Turns out there's no male aphids. All aphids are hermaphroditic. They are both sexes all at once. So there's an avuncular, it turns out, means like an uncle. So there
Okay.
are no uncle aphids. That's impossible. But I already had the idea, so I wrote about avuncular aphids.
I see.
Sometimes,
I also hear them sometimes, but I feel like more like they're coming to me. But if I don't write them right away, I lose them. And
yep,
if I don't write it right away, like when a poem comes to me, I really need to get the pen and paper and write it then and there, because otherwise I'm gonna be like, what was that poem? I don't have it anymore. Please come back to me. Where did you go?
absolutely.
I don't have the same feeling.
Pad by the bedside. Absolutely. Absolutely. And then the other one is I'll hear about an issue, and even though I didn't, it didn't come to me from inspiration, um, it's an issue that I want to write about. I need to write about. For example, there was this a mayor in New Jersey, in the northeast part of the United States, was arrested because he wanted to investigate if prisoners were being mistreated. The Trump administration is so racist that they want to get rid of all Hispanics. They want to get rid of all immigrants. It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. And this mayor wanted to investigate, was this prison a bad thing, and how, could he, by investigating it, find out that he could either close it or stop it or make things better. So I I thought that's horrible, and I need to write about it. Do you want to hear another poem?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I wrote this. It is called, and of course the police claimed that the mayor attacked them. Now, you know, I don't know what politicians around the world are like, but I suspect that most political people are not going to attack the police. That's just absurd. So I wrote this. It's called the mayor. They called it the mayor stormed the police. So I wrote the mayor storms, not storms, the prison. It really wasn't in him. They said he stormed the prison. He'd come to see it several times. He invited congressional leaders on his dime. He asked for a tour to check exactly what kind of justice did he expect. The kind that brown and black folks usually get when they bump right smack into some security net. And this is a private prison contractor, and I can tell you for sure that was a definite factor. He waited at the gate for permission to tour. He was told for a certainty that he wouldn't demur. If he submitted to a search, it might take a minute, as if he was some kind of church, but he couldn't get in it. He was the black mayor of Newark, New Jersey. Of this they were clear. He wore a suit, though he wasn't a clergy. Ras Baraka, let's call him by name. He came to investigate Delaney Hall. He brought several congresspersons, and that wasn't all. It was once used to confine drug abusers. They kept a group of patients for healing. That had been the plan, but that was decades ago in the darkness of history. The facility was filthy, and what they were up to now was a goddamn mystery. They never bothered to get a CO because they didn't really care to let anyone know. This profit-making prison, the largest in New England, he brought several congressmen along as his wingmen. He ignored several threats, said the spokesman from ICE. He wasn't compliant, complacent, subservient, or even nice. Alina Habba, a former attorney of Trump, chimed in with her opinion, of course, on the mayor we knew she would dump. Her opinion, Trump-flavored. It was tailored. It had that kind of flavor. Habba said he'd trespassed and that will not stand. Imagine having a press conference right there on the land, as if as a citizen it was really his business. So what happened when the mercenary cops got in this? Representatives Watson, Menendez, and MacGyver were not arrested, despite all the questions the folks in charge attested. They claimed the facility was fully permitted and they wouldn't enlarge, it just wasn't in them. That's all they would say. They were fully committed. The kind of city weren't, and it was just them with them sitting. His arrest was based on that, the thinnest of tissue, the very essence of civic law, permit at issue. The Insurrection Act of 1807 allows the military to perform a kind of law enforcement as the president sees fit. Posse comitatus was fought over this. The president is grinning. He's really in favor of this kind of stuff. Dead countenance, no inspection. They prefer doom, gloom, and perhaps a resurrection. And if stonewalling won't work, they have a phalanx of well-feathered attorneys that will fight it, wasting buckets of taxpayer money by day and by night to deny justice amongst us, the courts, in a constitutional crisis, in service to would-be tyrants, 2 or 3 beside us, so that you can place your reliance. It could happen to thee. Well, I guess we'll just have to see.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing it, Rick. Thank you. I also understand this more research part like of the creative process. I feel the same, mostly related to my articles or essays when I want to write an essay. Part of it is inspiration, part of it is very research mode, um, combination of
You're an
insights.
intelligent person. God bless you for that.
Thank you. God bless you too. I'm really, really grateful that we're talking right now. We're almost getting to the end. I only have two more questions prepared for you. The next one is related to your inner youngster. If you were to send a message to your inner youngster, the young man who did not know you would be where you are right now, having lived all these years, what would you tell him?
Go boldly.
Yeah, I think
Because,
I would tell my young version the same.
you know,
Just
we
do it.
tentatively find our way into our lives, and I have been surprised more often than not when some idea I had bears such rich fruit. And the fact that I get to meet people like you, my dear, you make my life richer. Thank you.
Thank you. Likewise, I really feel the same. And my last question is actually coming from America. So I've heard some of Tim Ferriss's interviews, and I find them very interesting. I feel he's done amazing interviews with amazing people, and I'm really, really grateful that he just gives them to us, you know. And I've noticed that he likes to end many of his interviews with a question that I find really good. So I would like to quote it with a lot of gratitude for his interviews. And this question is, what would you put on a billboard to get a message out to millions of people?
Look carefully and graciously at what surrounds you, because this is our gift from the world. You are a gift to the world.
So thank you so much, Richard. I am so honored beyond words. I hope you can feel it. It's we're quite far away, but I feel that tonight we were very close despite the distance and the time zones. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it must be pretty late over your way.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the video recording actually gets the fact that the light is getting dimmer.
No, you're still well lit. You're still well lit.
It's soon getting dark. It was also quite rainy. Right now, I think the sun would be setting. So I know it's around noon for you. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview. I feel like my life is richer now that I've had this conversation with you, Richard.
Thank you. My honor.
I think we're both honored, and I'm really looking forward to also creating the transcript and putting it on the blog. And I'm pretty sure that we will continue our conversation. We're both artists, and I'm pretty sure that for us, it doesn't really stop here, even though for
I'm
tonight,
going to ask you to promise if you make it across that you come see me and
for
I can
sure.
treat you with the grace and honor and respect that you deserve.
Thank you. I would be honored. I had heard that they're getting the visas out of the question, but apparently they're back on, so I think it's quite
This
complicated.
this too shall pass. This too shall pass.
But for sure, I would like to come to America at least once in this lifetime, and I'm
Well,
really hoping
if
to
I
meet
have a
you.
roof, you have a roof.
Thank you, Rick. It's the same for if you want to come to Europe.
I hope
For
to
sure.
again. I hope to again.
For
Thank you.
sure. And if not to Romania, it's easier for me to come to another country. Thank goodness we're still in the European Union, the Schengen thing. It's a dream come true. Europe without borders. It's really
Yes.
a dream come true. So for sure, if you're ever coming to Europe, let me know, and I will do my best to come meet you because I would really like to meet you in person.
Yes. And I will send you this video. Okay.
Thank, thank you. We'll be in touch. Thank you. Many blessings,
And you
many
too, my dear. You
blessings.
too.
And
Bye bye.
thank you so much again.